Hi, Joe and Emily here, and we are ready to now carve our pumpkins. So Emily's going to demonstrate first, and what we're going to do is find some part of your design. Usually it's a small part towards the inside. We want to do the small parts first, and you're going to enter the saw perpendicularly into the pumpkin. You're just going to kind of poke down, and then you're just going to saw up and down like a scroll saw, or almost like a sewing needle. Um, how you actually work on your pumpkin is up to you. You can work on it while sitting at a table and the pumpkin is facing you. What Emily's doing is standing up and working on it from top down, which is actually how I prefer to work, whether I'm standing up or sitting with the pumpkin in my lap. But it makes it easier for me to see. You can see she's having no trouble uh, sawing through the pumpkin. All right, I'm working on carving some of these inside parts first, which just involves, being very gentle, almost like a sewing motion, going up and down. It's not required that you take out parts of the pumpkin that you carve right away. You can always poke those out later. Um, and you always want to work on the smallest parts first, especially here on the inside, because once we cut off these lines here that are the outside of the bat and the pumpkin, trying to cut inside of them makes those more wobbly. So here I'm going to demonstrate with the pumpkin. I'm just poking the saw through and doing almost like I'm sewing or writing or scroll sawing. You very easily just cut through along the lines of the holes. Emily here got a little bit excited and cut out the biggest part of her pumpkin first, but she should still be okay because she still has quite a bit of pumpkin here between the nearest cut. But usually the biggest parts of the pumpkin are what we want to do last. We want to do the narrow parts like she's got with these eyes here. So as Emily's working here, I'll point out that from time to time, mistakes are made, and you end up cutting through something you don't want to. But all is not lost. Sometimes you can be able to get to cut off a chunk you need to stay on. You can reattach it with like a toothpick or even a staple. Nobody's going to see that when you light it up at night. But that'll keep your pumpkin together well enough, at least to display for a few nights. And another thing to point out is sometimes you might make your pattern with just a little bit too much detail. And if you've got something like a hole that is smaller than the saw, you can use something like a toothpick or even sometimes the poking tool that comes with the pumpkin carving kit. And when you're using a toothpick, you start the hole, then poke the toothpick through, and then pull it out from the inside. And that'll leave just a tiny little hole that will let light come through. Here I'm carving the last big pieces of my pattern. And again, there's no rule that says that I have to keep that piece intact. So sometimes it's easier to deal with the larger pieces by cutting into them so that they're smaller when it's time to poke them out. If you're worried about a piece of the pumpkin wobbling too much while you carve, actually you saw faster. Just not as don't push down as hard. Again, it's more like a sewing needle or a scroll saw. And eventually you'll get there. It'll wiggle less. And when you get to the corner there, you're done. And eventually, when you want to poke that piece out, you can either poke it out from the inside or push it. All right, you can stop. And here Emily is demonstrating what part of her pumpkin's eye has actually come out, and she's going to try and reattach it. And here Emily is demonstrating where she was trying to reattach a piece of her eye that came off. Um, and that's probably as good as we're going to be able to do. Okay, we're done carving. We've punched out all the pieces I've carved out. And now we're almost done, but I always like to test. Usually take the pumpkin to someplace dark and just shine the flashlight into it. See, are all the holes shining the way I want them to? And if they're not, you can always take the saw and scrape out a little bit more. But always try to scrape out on the inside of the pumpkin and not on the skin. The pattern you leave on the skin of the pumpkin is always going to be what shows. But you can control a little bit how much light comes through by what angle you carve into the pumpkin. You can always carve it a little bit more out if you want to let more light in. All right, we're all done carving our pumpkins. And all we need to do is wait for it to get dark, put candles in them, and light them up. When it is finally time to light the pumpkin at night, you have many choices. Of course, electric candles are recommended for safety, but these little electric tea lights, you need about 50 of them to actually be able to see your pumpkin. You could use an actual tea light, but again, you need 2 or 3 to shine a pumpkin up brightly. I like to use these slightly taller candles. They seem to produce just a good amount of light to be able to see a pumpkin. Or you could even try one of these bigger ones, which will definitely light the pumpkin. Also probably singe the inside, but they still do have their purpose. Something I'll get to in the next video.
And there they are, all lit up. We've got the bat and pumpkin here. And we have Emily's pumpkin. Emily, did you have something you wanted to say about it?
To all you Blox Fruits players out there, what fruit is this? And if you know what it is, write it down below in the comments.
And then finally, we also have one more bonus pumpkin. How'd that get there? I figured I should include that considering it goes along with the theme of the other videos on my channel. Well, thanks for following along this far. I've still got one more video to go where I'm going to go over the odds and ends of other types of pumpkins you can carve and some tips for preserving your pumpkins or bringing it back to life. Thanks for watching.